with my tax dollars to do it. And I don't have the right for my kids to go to school and be in a safe building.
Parent Greg Lawson is on the other side of the debate, arguing that dollars are best served following each individual child to their school of choice.
I spend a lot of tax money. I want a little bit of that back so that I am able to put my student where I think it's the right thing.
Some Republicans argue that school districts may not be spending money wisely. Woodward explains that public schools face audits, while non-publics don't have to follow transparency guidelines.
There is no way to tell where they are spending that money or what they're doing with it. Should we be having that with taxpayer dollars?
Well, look, I think that we could have some further conversation about that. I think we want to be very careful at how we do it, because what we don't want to see happen is we don't want to see a heavy hand of the government coming in and then dictating certain things from a curriculum standpoint.
The governor sits in the middle of this debate, wanting to protect public schools while also providing choice for families.
They should make their point of view available to the governor, but they also should do it to their legislators.
The budget will likely be passed out of the House this week, but still has to go through the Senate. At the Ohio State House, I'm Morgan Trout reporting.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference for our first critical conversation of 2025. We're so glad to have you here. There's a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot going on in the world. So it's a good time to have a discussion. This evening, we're going to have a critical conversation about how the defunding of public education is going to affect our children and our communities. I'm Reverend Dr. Susan K. Smith, the Director of the Office of Clergy and Leadership Resource Development.
And I'm Reverend Marcus Tabb, Co-Director of the Department of Clergy and Leadership Resource Development. Before the election, we did a series on Project 2025, for those of you who are with us, concentrating on just a few of the ways it would affect our communities.
And one of those areas was education. So before it was theoretical, now it's reality. Now we're in the time of praxis. We're living under the shadow of this plan, and it promises to be as devastating as we thought. For those of you who have not ever downloaded Project 2025, I ask you to do it. And you go on page 515, I think, and you can see everything that is proposed for the Department of Education. But tonight, we're going to be talking about it. And we're honored to have with us two educators who will help us understand what's going on and what we can do to make sure that we take care of our children.
So please welcome this evening the Reverend Dr. Janette Wilson, National Executive Director of Push Excel, and Dr. Sonya Whitaker, founder of Whitaker Education Consulting for Push Excel. We want to encourage you tonight to listen to the conversation and to enter your questions in the Q&A or the chat section, and we'll feed those questions to our guests. We want to hear from you tonight and make sure that the questions and the conversation is engaging.
Amen. So both of these women have just extensive resumes, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but Dr. Janette Wilson currently serves as a senior advisor to Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. and the National Executive Director of Push for Excellence. She has worked with Push as a volunteer and as sort of a staff member since she graduated from law school in 1980. Additionally, she serves as senior pastor of Maple Park United Methodist Church. She fascinates me because she's done so many things. She began her career as a chemist. She transitioned to the legal profession and finally to Christian ministry. She is an outstanding educator and knows what the heck she is talking about. Then we have with us Dr. Sonya Whitaker. She is a highly regarded educator whose experience has included serving as superintendent of schools and deputy superintendent of schools. She obtained national superintendent certification through the National Association of School Superintendents. She is also currently the National Education Policy Director for Push for Excellence, the education arm of Rainbow Push Coalition, and the newly elected president of the South Suburban Chicago Alliance of Black School Educators. She is a published author, blogger, host of the Sonya Whitaker Podcast 2.0, and a national speaker on topics related to equity in education. So we are glad that you guys are here. So I want to begin this conversation by, it's probably a weird way to get into it, but what always astounds me, and it shouldn't astound me, but what always astounds me is how much of the stuff we're going through today is so rooted in racism. So rooted in racism. And the reason I say that is because I was reading up on the history of public education. And of course, Nat Turner, had the rebellion, and the slave owners realized that he could do what he did because he could read, and they didn't want Black people to be able to read because that would make them less able to be controlled. And so, although there were efforts to have education, it was not controlled by the federal government. Then the President Garfield, I think, came along and wanted there to be like a unified system of education so that the United States would have a united, a system of education so that everybody kind of knew the same thing. I call it indoctrination, but I don't know. But it ran up against some opposition after the Civil War because the people who owned African Americans or Africans and who became Americans did not want Black people to learn they didn't want to learn how to read. And I think that's at the heart of what we're talking about now, isn't it? Y'all help me out on this. We'll start with you, Dr. Whitaker.
Well, the first thing, again, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to contribute in this way. The first thing that came to my mind when you started speaking was Dr. Isabella Wilkinson's book entitled The Origins of Our Discontent. And the manner in which she describes the caste system is, again, the first thing that came to my mind. And the reality, when you mentioned how much of this is rooted in racism, I can't help but to think about it being a very deliberate, a very carefully planned and orchestrated attempt to ensure that the marginalized remain marginalized.
That's right. That's right.
My initial response to that question.
Dr. Sandra? I'm sorry, Dr. Janette, I'm sorry. I've had Sandra on my mind all day long. I'm sorry.
It's clear that public education had its roots in sexism and racism. The first public school was in Boston, and it was started as a Latin school for white males. And so historically, there has been this idea that only certain people would be educated, and particularly the privileged class, those who had the means. And so if you had no property, you were not allowed to become educated. And that concept, that patriarchal system, and as Dr. Whitaker talked about, the origins of our discontent, it's clear that it was not designed for us to become educated. We fought for public education. And, we established the freedom schools, which we now replicate in some churches today. Our schools were in church buildings, one-room classrooms that had to fund themselves with used books from the majority institutions. We were never given the adequate resources or equal resources that our white counterparts had. I visited a one-room school classroom, and it was just shocking where my cousins attended. Half the pages were not in the book.
Right.
In the books. And, I'm trying to figure out, how do y'all read books with torn out pages and stuff written all on the pages, no new books. And yet those children were able to matriculate from first to eighth grade, then go to high school, and many of them attended college. It's just an amazing thing that we have had to struggle through this racism and sexism.
And in spite of all of that stuff, we've been able to become physicists and doctors and lawyers and all that. So their efforts to keep us up underneath their thumbs have not been successful. But my question is, do you feel like that what's happening is intentionally being done to slide us back to that, so we don't have even the quality that we have now? I've read that $12 billion total have been proposed to be cut from the Department of Education, and $4.5 billion is being cut from the K through 12 programs. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And there are four things that they say that this defunding of the public education system will do. One is dismantling civil rights protections. Number two, block grants. It's the proposal states it's going to preserve funding for two extremely popular and high-end programs for Title I and for individual and a program for individuals with disabilities. So they're going to keep that. They're going to block access. These funding cuts will block access to higher education. And it says, and this is the thing that got me, the only program in the public education system that's getting more money is the voucher program.
Well, here's the thing. They want to eliminate, and Dr. Whitaker can really speak to this, SNAP benefits, Medicaid, which covers the health program for children that attend school. So now our children will be unhealthy. They will not be immunized with this administration that doesn't believe in immunizations. It will cut hundreds of billions of dollars in the program. And so you will leave several Americans, 13.7 million will be uninsured. That means children will not have access to physicals and medical treatment, except for emergency rooms. SNAP benefits are going to be cut, which will impact the children's ability to have free and reduced meals every day. When you talk about Title I, you got to feed these children. Many of the families are so poor. And it's not just Black children, it's poor rural children who will not have any breakfast or lunch every single day. When they arrive at school, they will just be hungry for the rest of the week. And Dr. Whitaker can talk about how they had to feed children, not only during COVID, but in the summer.
Absolutely. And I can't help but to think about the fact that most of our children, if not all of them, and their families rely on schools, not just to educate students, but to feed them, as Reverend Janette alluded to. I know in many of the school districts that I have led and served, we not only have provided over the years students with breakfast, we provided students with breakfast, lunch, and dinner to take home to their families. And also you have to think about the fact that we are now going into June, where many school districts across the nation are engaging in summer school. Cuts to federal funding, particularly as it relates to Project 2025 and the like, has resulted in some school districts not even being able to provide summer school, access to summer school for students that some who are still negatively impacted by the experience of COVID as it relates to their academic achievement levels. And so they're in need of before, after, and summer school as much as possible. And then I want to tack that back on to, and even in these summer school programs, many school districts had a tendency to provide students with breakfast, lunch, and then dinner to take home to their family. And so when we talk about, again, federal funding cuts in this area in particular, it really devastates not only the children that we serve, but it devastates the community, the most vulnerable communities where our students, most vulnerable students, attend school.
And then the cuts to higher education. Most of the African-American students, Latino students, and students of color and students in these rural communities, they can only go to college with a Pell Grant. Now they're going to change the rules for how you get a Pell Grant, as well as cutting the benefit. They want to make thousands of student parents, working students, and first-generation students ineligible for Pell Grants. That's insane. It's absolutely insane. Many students are working just so they can attend college or colleges and universities. And even with that, they graduated still with debt. So for you to increase the level of debt and increase the inability of students to attend college is clearly not only racist, it's classist, because this is education for the classes, not for the masses. And that's what they're pushing. And ever since we had Brown versus Board of Education, which never gave us equal access to a high quality public education for everyone, it did not desegregate the resources.
Right.
It didn't even fully desegregate the schools, but it never desegregated resources. So affluent areas, and Dr. Whitaker has worked in an affluent area as well as in a poor area. The access that students have whose parents are rich and upwardly mobile is vastly different than children who attend schools in these low-income areas that are based on property taxes.
Have a lot of teachers, to your knowledge, have they already lost their jobs because of anticipated cuts to the schools, federal cuts to the schools?
My response to that is not that they've lost their jobs, but keep in mind, we were already experiencing a national teacher shortage.
Okay.
So we can't get enough teachers to even engage in the process of not bringing teachers back. It's important for your viewing and listening audience to recognize that what I've discovered is that, however, not all school districts are impacted by the national teacher shortage. Those school districts serving majority affluent, majority white students aren't experiencing it as much as school districts, again, serving Black students, brown students, and students experiencing the impact of poverty, which include white children. In other words, there are some school districts in our nation where students attend a school where as much as 60% of the teachers that are instructing them are not certified, are substitute teachers. I interacted with a school district a couple of weeks ago where the leader said that she had 25 schools in her district, and 15 of the 25 schools in that district are housed with 80% substitute teachers, and it is the schools serving majority Black children, majority children who are receiving free and reduced lunch. And if I may add on top of that, this is somewhat hot off the press, and I wouldn't be surprised if all states were impacted by this. In the state of Illinois, we received notice that as a result of federal administration, we were not going to be gaining access to our Title II funds. Our Title II funds are the funds that we use to provide training, to provide professional development to the teachers that service our students. So if I may, I want to connect a dot. So if the majority of the schools that service Black and brown children are being taught by substitute teachers who are not certified, we need training for those teachers now more than ever. Not only do we need training for the teachers that are certified, but we need training for the teachers that I just referred to, or the substitute teachers, and to find out that the greater majority of the funds that we were to gain access to provide the training is gone. That's problematic. You know, as my mom says, and I'm not telling you what I heard, I'm telling you what I know, because those funds, they sit on my desk in terms of being able to gain access online to state level databases and allocate funds. They're not there for me now if I go and log in and try to make a professional development plan for the teachers that I've just described. The budget is zero now.
Well, and the bigger issue is we're not preparing the students K to 12, and certainly they're not ready for higher education. And so as we are dumbing down our educational system, where are we going to get the nurses? Where are we going to get the lawyers from? Where are we going to get the doctors from? And the funding cuts will diminish our ability to have a workforce for the future in 2030. What are we looking at? Who are we preparing? And you know, this whole administration's move is a states' rights agenda. While education has never been a constitutionally protected right federally, every state gets to do something about decide how they're going to fund and what kind of education the students within those states will have. This push, by eliminating the U.S. Department of Education, you are now allowing states to just do whatever they want to do in terms of education. Some will not fund K to 12. They're going to shift the money to vouchers for private schools, some religious schools, and they are moving the dollars from public education. They're taking public dollars and giving them to private education. And the question is that fair?
Well, we know it's not fair. We know it's not fair, but I think it's real American. I think that it's, part of the American political educational tradition. I know that with these cuts in rural schools, and I'm glad you mentioned that because rural as well as urban schools are going to suffer. In the rural schools, there'll be reduced resources and programs. They often have smaller student populations and may face lower property tax base, a lower property tax base. So it makes them more dependent on state and federal funding. So changes leading to funding cuts could result in difficult choices. And one of the things I don't think that this administration thinks about is how these cuts. I think they're going after black and brown people. That's just my own opinion. But I don't think that they realize that what they're doing is going to hurt their folks as well. Really, both their folks. For urban schools, the negative impacts include exacerbating existing disparities. Many urban schools serve high concentrations of low-income students. Well, you already mentioned it, Dr. Jeanette, about how these kids have been in those schools and have messed up books with pages all out and stuff. It's just sickening to even think about. And they already face significant challenges, including overcrowded classrooms and outdated materials. And funding cuts will intensify these problems and widen the achievement gap between high and low poverty districts. My question is, do you think the people in the school, the parents, are aware of what's about to hit them? Do you think they are?
Oh, of course not. If you look at the school system today, and parents are not engaged, poor parents are not engaged in the school system as much as they should be or need to be. They are unaware of what's going on. They just drop Johnny and Jane off at school and expect them to stay there for the full day and then come home. They don't even know how to assist them in the learning. So that's why so many schools have after school programs to keep the kids up to date, allow them to do homework at school because they can't do it at home. Poor children have no access to the technology. We're in a technological age, and children in low income areas and in rural areas do not have access to the technology. And when Dr. Whitaker talked about teacher training, professional development has to occur because our teachers, many of them who've been in the system for 20 or 30 years, they don't know the technology that is happening today. They have not been trained in how to use or not use artificial intelligence. They don't know how this technology really works. And so they're going to need a lot of professional development. And if you have a school system that is staffed by substitute teachers, they don't even have a particular focus in that elementary school. I used to sub in the south suburbs, and that was many years ago. They wanted me to be the science teacher for the district because they don't have people qualified to teach science in most of these suburban school districts, and even in some schools in these metropolitan areas. Science and math is critical today. Ask her how many math and science teachers they can find who are qualified to teach in the schools.
So my question is, I have a bunch of questions, but do you guys as educators, do you talk about, I know you talk about the issues, but have you begun to talk about how we can fight this stuff, how we can beat it? You know what I'm saying? Have there been, powwows where y'all sit and say, okay, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to lose this, and we're going to lose it, but this is what we're going to do. Have you begun to have those types of conversations?
I think we've started. It has to go beyond the educators. It has to become a community movement. Every pastor has to understand what's happening in education. They should have adopted by now the school closest to their faith institution. They should be visiting it because they're going to have to supplement what happens. If the breakfast is cut, then churches and mosques and temples should open up and feed these kids breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If we want our children to be able to learn, children who are hungry will not learn. It's going to be more difficult for them. And secondly, we have to focus for a different kind of funding formula. You cannot fund education equitably using property taxes because in poor neighborhoods, property values are very low. The taxes are low. In affluent areas, they have more money. They pay more taxes. So you have to shift money around. Local governments, cities and counties are going to have to rethink how they fund the most important asset they have, and that's education. Because when you build a school, you bring businesses to the community.
I
Have you
think
had conversations with any of the parents? Either one of you, have you had conversations with parents and kind of shared with them what's going on, and have what kind of feedback from them have you
I'll
gotten?
tell you what I have found most beneficial, especially now, as it relates to getting parents more involved, is to help them become clear about how these changes in policies directly impact the schools in which their students attend.
Right.
A lot of times they don't know when they hear on the news and read in the newspaper that Title I funding will be cut. From most parents' perspective, they're like, "What is Title I? What does that mean to me?" Where I have again found that parents are more likely to advocate is when they know that the Title I funding, as Reverend Janette has alluded to, with regards to schools funding, most of the school districts serving poor and Black students rely on property taxes, and the property taxes very often don't come in are very low. And so in order to get the type of resources that we need, we have to rely heavily on the Title I funding, which has always been, prior to this administration, earmarked for students in the living in the most vulnerable communities. So where I'm going with that is to share with parents things like it will impact our ability to provide your child breakfast, lunch, and dinner free of charge. It will impact doing away with federal funding as it relates to Title I. That's tied to our ability to offer your children summer school programs. I had parents say the other day how grateful they were to be able to send their child to a summer school and not have to pay. Well, when those funds, Title I funds, are stripped, summer school is no longer available. To the parent that says, "Dr. Whitaker, my child has been attending the school district for 4 years in a row, and for every single year, they've only had a substitute teacher," to connect the dot to, and that is why we need Title II funding, because that is the majority of where the majority of the funding comes from for me or us to provide the training needed to make sure that your child is exposed to the best and the brightest. So connecting those dots, encouraging parents to advocate, creating a frequently asked question so that when they go to legislators, when they attend meetings where these conversations are being had, that they can press hard on the people that are accountable for advocating for them. They're armed, making sure that they're armed with the information that they need is what I found to be most beneficial.
And I think we're going to have to look at a different way of funding education. We spend a tremendous amount of money every day in schools on food. Well, wherever we get the food from, we're going to have to figure out how they reinvest in education that gives them the money that they make. These lunchroom programs, companies, school lunch programs, they make a significant amount of dollars. Our children and families, based on what we buy, our sales, consumer goods, we're going to have to look at how some of the sales tax revenue can be reinvested in education. You cannot fund education with a lottery, which is what they've tried to do in Illinois, putting that in the general fund. We need to do sales tax where people may not have high property taxes, they are buying things. And so we need to take some of that money and reinvest it in education. I mean, the idea that 40% of America's children rely on SNAP, that's a large number of kids. And then 1 in 4 college students face food insecurity. So we have to figure out, how do we feed America's children? Because if I'm not eating, I'm not thinking.
Yeah, you stop me right there because that's the truth. You can't do, and part B of that, I was thinking about this when we heard about Job Corps being dismantled. And those kids who had been living in those facilities and dorm rooms, because a lot of them were homeless and all that, and so that was their life. And they were getting trained to get a job. Then they're told to get out. And when you don't have anything to eat and you don't have anywhere to go, you're going to go to crime. And I think, and God help me for my cynicism at this point, but this administration does not care I mean, obviously, because a whole bunch of administrations haven't cared about Black and brown and poor children. These guys are at least blatant with their stuff, and I think that that they know what the repercussions will be. Even on Project 2025, they said public education isn't working, da 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 da. But they do know that if a kid doesn't have anything to eat and doesn't have anywhere to live, they're going to go to crime. They'll either go to crime or they'll, if they're old enough, they'll go to the military. Have you all talked about that at all? Because I'm very worried about what this will do to the crime rate. Not even mention the spirit. You know, little kids want to learn, they want to please their teachers and all that. If they can't do that in a good way, that's going to affect their spirit. So it's a rolling ball effect. Have y'all thought about that and talked about that?
Well, I think a couple of things. The school system has not functioned adequately for a number
Ever.
of years, for a number of years. And I was a chemist, a science major, environmental science, and having taught at every grade level, what I noticed in our formative years, we are not pushed into understanding scientific methods and where the technology is today. I mean, 1983 is here, that book, and our children don't even read anymore like they used to. I've asked some high school students, what books are you reading? They're not reading the things that we used to read about. We learned about our history. They don't know the history. They're not learning science, math, and technology across the board. And so education has been under-resourced and underperforming for a number of years. This president has just decided to dismantle it for the wrong reason. He's not trying to make it better. What he's trying to do is take the resources that are allocated to public education, shift them to private education through vouchers. And also it's an attack on historically Black colleges and universities. You're cutting funds to those schools and you're cutting research, which means America will lose its competitive edge in a global scale because you no longer will be able to get a PhD doing research on various subjects. There was a young Asian person who used to work in rocketry, and he was designing the rockets that would go to the moon and designing all kinds of technical engineering apparatus. He was deported before Trump, and he's back in China. And so who's the most competitive now in space technology? It's not America. We've lost our edge because we're not investing in our children. We're not investing in our future. When you cut education, you're cutting out your future.
So the whole voucher thing to me is welfare for the wealthy to me. These people have a whole bunch of money. They already have their kids in private schools and they just want the government to pay for everything. While they're talking about cutting the spending that's wasteful and all of that, they are really, they suck the blood out of America in terms of resources. That's something that is happening. That's the plan. They want to give those who have give them more, and those who have not just kind of let them fall by the wayside. My question is, what can we do now? What can educators, we talk about the parents, and many times parents aren't interested because they don't have time to be interested because they're tired. We know all of this stuff. But what can we do now to address this stuff? That's why we're having this conversation now, to address this stuff up front. If it were if it were possible, I would say to all the young bloods, that are going to go to college and play football and go to the white schools, I said, don't go over there. Go over to the Black schools. Support your own, that kind of thing. We have to get through all of the stuff that we have been fed historically that make us feel like still that which is being made unattainable to us is what we really want. What can we do, to right now to produce an excitement and enthusiasm and awareness or something within the community so that we can get our parents, because our parents can teach. Historically, our parents and grandparents and them, they taught us, because the white schools were still crazy back then, right? Mom and them said, you're going to read this book, right? What can we do? What could we give? What message could we give to the people who are listening? Because there has to be something that we can do now. My question to y'all.
I'd say we have to do something different. When we recognize that we don't have everyone in the classroom like we need, I think we need to go back to really pushing for the parents that can be there in the schools and the community members that can be there in the schools, doing some of the teaching, monitoring, not just taking students up and down the hallway, but in many schools, especially at the K-8 level, kindergarten through 8th grade level, we have students in small group instruction. I remember, I've been in education almost 30 years now, started out as a classroom teacher. I remember I had so many parents in the classroom, they were literally almost bumping into each other. I'm going to tell you, we don't see that as much now as we did before, and we need it now more than ever before. So I would say go back to, I'll say, the basics as it relates to involving parents in areas where they feel most comfortable in supporting the schools would be very important. And the other thing that I would like to see, I'd like to see educators more involved in advocacy. Most people went into education because they didn't want to have anything to do with politics. But what I'm saying to educators now is education is politics. It's called the politics of education. And the policies that are being made at the local, state, and federal level, the impact of those policies definitely make their way into the classroom. And so in communities where parents are too shy to advocate, where parents feel so vulnerable that they don't show up at the town hall meetings and they may not show up at the city council meetings like they should, educators have a lot of power, a lot of power, and far too often, in my humble estimation, they don't use it as much because they tend to shy away from the very thing that is negatively impacting their ability to be effective in their work, and that's politics.
Well, I agree with that, but I think we need to do three things. We must operate locally at the state level, at the city and the county level. There are enough people, pastors and people that are not working, that can attend these meetings and make sure that our voices are being heard about funding our schools. You go to a lot of these board meetings, school board meetings, nobody's there. Our parents are not there, teachers are not there fighting for the school, and faith leaders are not there, community leaders are not there. They'll call push and have us go and fight. I went to a school in Oak Park where they were experiencing racist actions by a teacher. I should not have had to go to Oak Park. It should have been Oak Park residents and pastors and community leaders in that meeting fighting for those kids. And so we have to go do that. And I think the church has a major responsibility. You cannot sit in these communities and have something on Wednesday and Sunday and think you have done your part. We must open up these buildings, have after-school programs at the church. I learned to read before I ever got to school.
Come on. Them Sunday school teachers were rough, man. They didn't play.
In Sunday school. So we need to have readathons. Push Excel will be having a readathon this summer. We got to get our kids. We have to have a reading competition. We have to have spelling bees. I watched the National Spelling Bee. We used to have spelling bees. If the school doesn't do it, we can do it. We're teaching technology every Saturday at Push STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. It's like pulling teeth to get the kids in the building. So I'm suggesting that faith and community organizations must open up, attend these school board meetings, attend city council meetings when they're talking about education, and go to Springfield. If you're in Illinois, go to the state capitol and voice your support for funding. The funding has to come from the state. And we need to ask these schools, go to your child's school, meet your child's teacher, exchange understandings. What are you teaching? I don't understand new math. Tell me what I'm supposed to do to help my child. You have to force educators, not force all of them, but share with them, I want to know, what is my child learning? You don't have to know how, but you have to know, Johnny and Jane not reading at grade level. I need you to tell me what I need to do to help them. And we will, and I think the community organizations, the civil rights organizations, we have to fight against this system. Every legislator should be doing a filibuster in Congress fighting against any moves about education. Now, what the president is doing, he's moving by executive order. But I would stop any actions on the part of any congressperson or senator, anything that relates to education. They should just do a filibuster, because you have to stop legislation from moving forward. If we stop them over here, that will send a signal to them over here that we want our children properly educated. We want the Department of Education to remain, because when they eliminate the department, they're going to shift the budget. It's not about the department. They're shifting the budget to different departments that we don't even know where they're going to put it.
So I'm listening to you, to both of you, and we all hate always hearing the things that are wrong, because it's just like a pain. We listen to them all the time. But you said something, both of you said something that just makes me think, in freedom schools, they use those young kids to help young kids. Young kids like to see those young kids, them college kids, they think they're big time. And the college kids have the energy, right?
Yeah.
They're not tired. They don't have that job, and the supervisor that gets on their nerves, and still don't have no money. So if they have that enthusiasm and that energy, and they also, in this age of technology, they talk the kids' language, right? Because those of us who didn't grow up with the computers, we talk like we used to talk. But the kids, they talk a different language. And maybe if there is, and I'm just throwing this out for y'all to talk about, maybe if people who are listening, that if we find a creative way to replicate in some way that freedom school model, where we go get them college kids, or the young people who still have the energy and the fight in them, so that they can do what older people might not be able to do because they're too tired. What do you think about that? And when you said readathon, I thought, oh, get them college kids over there. They'll love that. Or I thought about you when you said that. I wrote down double Dutch contest. You can teach math when kids are doing double Dutch and that kind of stuff. But trying to get them a little bit of the old fashioned with the new technology, that might be the way, because the parents are too tired, many of them.
I think we have to do both and. We have to fight for policy changes.
Absolutely.
At the state level. You cannot allow your state legislators to not fund education for your children.
Come on now.
Every state rep has a district. Every state senator has a district. You have to ask them, these are the schools in your district. What are you going to do to make sure that every child gets a high quality public education? The other thing Reverend Jackson often told us, he believed in parents, preachers, and popular personalities have to work together to push education. We can't keep pushing this dummy down foolishness. And so I'm not mad at any of the artists, but every popular personality that we can reach has to help push reading, push math, push school. Many times she can't teach a child that's not present. We don't even have a truancy program in the state of in Chicago. There's nobody looking for the kids when they're absent. We've lost several students since COVID. We have to go back to being our own truant officers.
Come on now.
Because schools are funded based on average daily attendance. Well, if there's no attendance, you have an average daily deficit in schools. And so I think it's a collective. I keep going back to faith, and community has to be involved. In the South, they made sure that Johnny and Jane could read, because you had to read the Sunday church bulletin. You had to do math because you had to count how many people were there every Sunday and put it up on the board. That's old school. They can do it with technology. We have to engage the community.
Yeah.
It takes a village, then the village has to start functioning around education. I used to have to show my report card to the pastor, to everybody. And my teacher was there.
Mm-hmm.
I know my teachers' names. These kids don't know these teachers. If you got a sub every day, you don't even know who they are.
And that is critical, Dr. Janette, because I go back to this whole technology thing. Community is different now. The concept of community is different now, because kids don't even talk to each other. They got those phones. They text each other. They don't talk to each other. They don't look nobody in the eye. They don't do any of that. And so we have to we have to really enter into this century because I think educators, pastors, advocacy groups, we are responsible maybe for helping to create a new community for the sake of the survival and the vibrancy of our community.
A community is built around meals. If I'm
Okay.
hungry and you feed me, I listen to you. Because when I'm eating, I'm not watching that phone. I'm eating. So I think
Well, some of them don't put them phones down, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
But you can make them put them down if you feed them. They hungry, they'll sit out and talk to you. I just think it has to be a collective focus on education. And that's the one thing that's going to take us to the next level. We cannot lose an educated workforce.
Do you guys ever talk about the part of kids that is naturally competitive? I say that because I was talking with some people this weekend and they're taking some kids to Black History Museum in Cincinnati. And so they said they ain't gonna be interested in that. So then the dad said, well, we're gonna make it a contest. We're gonna go in there and we're gonna have them look at stuff and we're gonna tell them before we go in that I'm going to ask you about so and so and so and so and so. And he's talking about his kids, but it's going to be a whole group of kids. And whoever wins, whoever knows all the answers or the most answers is going to get a prize. I thought that was pretty brilliant. What do y'all think about that? Feeding into that natural part of kids, they want to beat somebody. We could do. I mean, I just find myself. Yes, we need the advocates. We need the advocates. There are some people who are going to be good advocates, and some people who are never going to do it. But there are some things that I think that we have at our fingertips. I think that we could use. Do you think?
So I'm gonna respond to that in a bit of probably a different way.
Okay.
My response to that is I'm thinking about generational poverty. And I'm thinking about, and when I say the statement, you're going to say, connect that dot. I'm thinking about the ban on books and generational poverty, and watch where I'm going to go with this. I think that generally speaking, students have a tendency to be competitive. However, tying that back to generational poverty, you cannot be what you cannot see.
That's true.
I'm thinking about self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm thinking about the deliberate attempt by the federal government and those that support this leadership to strip our children of text, of access to books and stories that teach them about how resilient their people have always been since the beginning of time.
Right.
It is that level of resiliency. It is that level of exposure to people that look like you, that were responsible for building Black banks, that were responsible for Black Wall Street and the like. It is that level of exposure that we need Black and brown children in particular to have so that they know that their people that look like them, have made significant contributions to society. And I think that we should not go to sleep on the fact that I have a tendency to believe that the people on the other side of this conversation that are banning our books realize that if our children ever got wind of who they really
Come
are.
on, that's right.
I said I was not going to go to 10 today, but if our children, if our babies, kindergarten through grade 12, ever got wind of what their people did in terms of building America on their backs, they'd be something else to contend with.
And I think that's
shutting it down.
That's significant.
That is.
But in order for us to have that, it takes everybody focused on our children. You have to have teachers that are in that classroom, the same teacher every day for the school year. You can't have people dipping in and dipping out because I'm not going to be able to focus. I'm not going to be able to know. I used to go to do truancy at CPS, and I asked some high school students why they would not go to this particular class. First of all, they had math at 7:30 in the morning. Dad said, that's the worst thing to put me in. I don't even like math. And then you had a boring teacher that never turned around to the class. He just kept writing on the board. And then they told me that They had a substitute 3 out of 5 days. He said, if they can't come, why should I go? So we have to be really honest about our system. What is happening in these buildings? Somebody has to look at that, monitor that, and fight for equity. You don't have that happen in Barrington or these affluent areas, Neuqua Valley. And the school has to be upgraded to reach where we are today. I went to Neuqua Valley. They have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Therefore, they're training young people to go to the Olympics in swimming. They had, the school it says, welcome to Neuqua Valley. It's like an Olympic Park district where you have track and field. Our children don't get athletics every day, every week in some schools. We have to restore to these buildings programs that will inspire children. Art, performing arts, and you have to have PE in elementary school. I had the symphony orchestra came to my grade school, so I learned music in elementary school. I could see we went to the opera. Our children are not getting the exposure because they've cut field trips. Somebody has to subsidize this stuff so that every child has access to all this information. And I think Dr. Whitaker is right, and I think you're right, but you got to be really clear that somebody has to love these children enough to make sure that they're getting what the parents cannot give them.
I agree with that. I
Show
agree.
them more than their parents can. I mean, some parents, the best they can do is you go up there to that school and learn something more than I did. That's their expectation. So when they hit those buildings, they have to be given the best that we can provide. And that's not happening everywhere across the board. We segregate children in Chicago based on aptitude. We never did that. All of the children were in the same building. So you saw children that were working hard and you saw children that were struggling. Those that worked hard helped those that were struggling. You had each row help to help the next one. Because if you're not succeeding, then I'm not going to go very far because you're going to pull me back. We have to go back to really focusing on education. I think we got to have more parent meetings, but I'm telling you, the community where these schools sit has to expect every child in those buildings, whether they're your biological child or not, to do well. And the buildings have to be improved. They got to be. I look at our schools, they don't look any different than they did in the 50s.
And you're right. And we do have to pay attention to that. I want to ask you, and then we have some questions in the Q&A thing I need to try to get to, but do you think, because parents in general in our communities are not as aware of things as we would like them to be or they need to be, do you think there's a value in making, telling them something that's going to tick them off? Like they want to use your tax dollars and pay for the kids to go to the private schools, because people don't know that. People don't know that voucher says, they hear voucher, they know what it means, but they don't know. But that means that funds that could be used for their schools are being used for kids to go to those private schools. Do you think that telling them something like that could get them interested and say, shoot, I don't want that. What can I do? I know it would tick me off. I'd be ready to, come on, let's do something.
Yeah, but it's like the parents that come up to schools, and Dr. Whitaker can share, many times they come up to fight
teachers
and administrators for various reasons. So those that come are not coming asking, they're coming demanding whatever, they're frustrated. And so I think that we have to have these meetings where we have to teach the parents what they need to know, but they have to tell them, how do you redress your grievance? I had a parent whose son was engaged in a fight at school. He was an academically excellent student, but he got in a fight and they refused to let him march at graduation, 8th grade graduation. And the parent wanted me to make the principal change her policy. And so we have to, some schools, you have to, when you start the school year, you have to give the parents the rules of what will happen. You don't tell them a week before, 3 days before graduation. Right. That's just painful. And they don't understand that because
And that makes people defensive too. When you
yeah.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
makes them defensive.
it makes it is, and you have a lot of that hostility every 10 weeks. She can tell you when those report cards come out, they haven't been in the school, haven't been to the school, checked any
Right.
homework for 10 consecutive weeks. And now they're shocked because she flunked.
So I'm really got to get to these questions, but I have one more question. So if you go through the back door, when we were doing some training here in Columbus, Ohio, to get people who were out on the polls, peacekeeper training, we call it. And I insisted on an active shooter training. And we gave that first active shooter training. It scared them people half to death. They didn't want to be peacekeepers. I said, well, you got to think about it. So what we did is we did it another way. We wove it in a different way so that there would be a time, a place for them to be receptive. I'm just asking that maybe if there's another way, and I still got to get to these questions, but think about that. Another way for us to be able to communicate with the parents, maybe, sit down and have a dinner. Because you already said it, Dr. Janette, when people are eating, they kind of cool out. So if we are able to, to do that, we just gonna have a conversation. We just want you to know what's going on. And they won't really care at first because they're eating. You're right. And then, because what you want to do, you won't get all of them, right? But if you get two or three, one or two, you've done something. I just want us to think about what we can do. I know that we know some of the problems. Y'all know the problems, the real big problems. We know some of the problems, but I just want us to be creative. Give us a message that we can take to the pastors and to the congregations, say we're going to try this over here. So I'm gonna get in trouble. So somebody asked, what role do you think the faith-based community could play to assist our children's education? Have we answered that already, do you think?
I think they have to do what Bishop Henry Williamson started before he passed. One church, one school. Wherever your faith institution is located, there's a school near you, like elementary and a high school. You should know everybody in that building. You should know the teachers, the administrators, the support staff in those buildings. The students should know you because you should go there, not because a child died, but because they go to school there and you are encouraging them. Those children should be able to share their report cards with you on report card pickup, not just the parents.
Okay.
And I think the faith leaders should consider helping to fund some things for those schools, breakfast in the morning or dinner. And for the colleges, we need to put these HBCUs in our church budgets, in our faith institution budgets, so that every year we're donating to an HBCU. There are 103 of them. They're subject to close, the smaller ones where our children may need to go because of funding cuts.
Okay. Dr. Whitaker, Preston Gibson asks, would you say and explain how race and class are intertwined?
Oh, I can appreciate that question. With regards to race and class, when we talk about the children very often that are experiencing the greatest difficulty in America's public schools, you noticed I used the term children of color, and children experiencing the impact of poverty, which include white children. The reality is that some of our most affluent Black and brown children, depending upon the zip code in which they reside, they may have more exposure. They do have very often more access to the resources that they need. Something as simple as a swimming pool to as intense as, access to aerospace engineering classes at the pre-K 5 level. That does look different. And as has been alluded to, I have had the opportunity to work, to teach, and to lead in some of America's most affluent school districts, as well as the poorest school districts. So I've been able to see on the front end what the schooling experience is like, for the purpose of this conversation, for a Black child in a more affluent school district versus a Black and or a white child in a school district where the majority of them are experiencing the impact of poverty. So I'm saying all that to say that the experiences are different, and in many cases, it's not just associated with the race or the cultural background of the students as much as it is associated with the economic class structure. In fact, I would venture to say if we began to study the achievement levels of students in America's schools, I would venture to say that majority of poor white students are actually very often noted as negatively impacted in terms of their performance on standardized tests. So class does matter, and I think it's important that we don't forget that. So I'm grateful for that question, that the conversation does extend beyond race.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
This is one of the biggest things that we face. And I think school systems have to be creative about education. I've always believed that the average teacher has not been exposed to the current level of technology or corporate growth and need. So what are you teaching children to do? The ultimate goal. Yes, you want them to be able to communicate in a society, but how do they leave you and get a job or make a living? And if you don't know what's happening in the rest of the world that you live in, you're not preparing them properly. What is the language of corporate America? What kind of skills do they need to have, particularly for high school students? What are we preparing them to do? And we have to think, it's not the 50s anymore. It's not the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s. We're in 21st century. Are we preparing children for the 21st century? That's what parents have to ask. That's what we should be fighting for.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Timothy Holly just put a question. The other questions I'm going to come back to, but Timothy Holly asked a question I think we need to address. He says, there has been no discussion about the coming impact of AI on education. What do we think about that? That's really critical.
I think that's perhaps, and I'll let Dr. Whitaker talk about it, it's a big deal. And every educator has to be retrained in how AI, because you're using it every day on these phones. Our children know it better than we do, and at least know how to access it. Question is, how do you know if I wrote the paper or not? How do you give credit to sources now, footnotes? We used to get dinged for not having adequate footnoting. So AI is changing the way we learn and the way we respond to learning.
Dr. Whitaker?
So I'm thinking actually about that question from two different prongs, and one being the training for teachers who are very shy, that's more so than I can appreciate, to actually even engage in training of that nature. Also, I'm thinking about, as has been indicated, my exposure to systems where students are more affluent, and then systems where students are experiencing the impact of poverty. And the fact that in the more affluent systems today, those teachers are not only getting the training on how to use AI to enhance their instruction, but their students they're taught how to use it as a leverager. That puts poor students and Black and brown students at a huge disadvantage when we don't take the legitimate parts of AI, the way that they can use it to advance their learning. If you think about this, if you think about what I have noticed is that, again, some of the poorer students, not all, because I'm careful not to make sweeping generalizations, but where some of the poorer students I've been exposed to, they come to kindergarten far behind their more affluent classmates at the same age level. So there's already that gap. And then if you add on top of that, that the more affluent students are actually being taught deliberately how to leverage AI for the purpose of advancing their learning. And then the other side of that, the students that I am also referring to are in schools where the teachers are shy or just downright opposed to learning anything new, much less how to use AI to advance teaching and advance student learning. It puts the students that I'm referring to at a huge disadvantage. And quite frankly, I think it should be mandated to a certain extent, with perimeters, of course, to ensure safety, et cetera, et cetera.
It must be mandated, because I have been in classrooms, and I know you have, where Computers are sitting idle on desks.
Mm.
Teachers are rejecting the technology of the present and the future. You either learn it or you be used by it.
Mm-hmm.
Our children are operating at a complete deficit. When my daughter was 2, a friend of mine was testing Read a Rabbit, Write a Rabbit, Math Rabbit. So she learned how to read with Read a Rabbit, learn math. So when she gets to kindergarten, she's already reading above grade level. That's what's happening in these affluent school districts. These kids are a step above, not because they're brighter. They've already been given up to 3rd grade math and reading. When they enter, our children are several years behind in basic reading and math.
Which is another reason why it's so tragic that the funding is being pulled out, because they're taking away money for Head Start and preschool education as well. And the reasons they gave in Project 25 was because they didn't see any noticeable improvement in the reading skills and stuff of our kids, which is a whole nother conversation, but that's very important. Janette Foreman asks, if everything is being dismantled, we are in a flat out war that we need to acknowledge. Civic education workshops for youth, parents, staff teaching how to lobby legislators, administrators sounds like a great plan. I agree with you, Janette Foreman. I think the panel agrees with that. Am I correct?
We absolutely agree.
Yeah, because there needs to be advocacy.
And that's something that we're going to start the training. And we hope that all of your listeners and viewers will say, hey, I will come. I want to know. I want to learn. We're going to have to do that. You remember when we had to, Reverend Jackson worked to get teachers, Black teachers certified to teach in Chicago public schools. You have to gather and learn together and then lobby together. This is a time for unity. That was one of the things that we focused on at our convention and our back to school program this year. We're really calling on teachers, parents, and other educators. K-12 teachers have to work with the K-20 teachers, because we're preparing students that can either go to trade school or college. We have to know what they need to know in order to prepare them. It's not the 50s, it's not the 60s, it's not the 70s, it's 2025.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Tracy Blackman asks, how do you erect private religious schools and use the voucher system to fund the education of our children? How do we use their own game against them? Dr. Whitaker.
I think we use their own game against them by, at the very least, pushing for policies that hold them accountable for the same level of standards that public school teachers and administrators are held accountable to. For example, as was alluded to in the opening video, private schools and school districts and schools that are stripping public schools of their funding via vouchers are giving taxpayer dollars to educate children, but they don't have to produce the results on students' standardized tests.
Right.
They don't have to produce results in terms of the percentage of Black and or brown children that are given access to that educational experience. They don't have a quota to meet as it relates to the percentage of special students with special needs or bilingual students that gain access to that curriculum and that academic experience. And yet, school districts that are required to provide education to all students, regardless of their background, are not only held accountable for how students achieve on a standardized test that in many cases is not even in alignment with what teachers are actually teaching, which is why they keep changing the test, and that's another story. But we're still graded, deemed a failing school district or a successful school district based on how students are performing on an assessment that people at the policy level think is important for them to perform on, but not important enough to hold the private and the schools receiving funds via vouchers for the same level of accountability.
And that's a problem. It is inequitable funding. You're taking my dollars and giving it to a private school, which parents have a right to choose. The question is, how do you make that equitable in terms of the transfer of those dollars? And as she said, and if you have a right in a private school to reject students, can't do that in public school. Got to take everybody. Got to take your little baby son that won't sit still, can't sit still. You don't have to deal with funding children with issues, cognitive delay, and all sorts of issues that are in public schools, and you have to pay for the staff supporting. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Private schools should have to have those requirements. They also can just put a child out without any communication. Public schools have to keep them until they just almost terrorize the school. And so the rules got to play the game by one set of rules.
This is also interesting. You know, we could have hours of these kind of conversations. Robert Simmons has been asking a whole bunch of questions. Robert Simmons, I've seen you, but I couldn't get to you because we're talking here. But he asked this question: how do we maximize use of the online community and cell phones to communicate important information? It's an excellent question. How do we maximize use of the online community and cell phones to communicate important information? Now, let me share with this that when we were doing some voter registration, a lot of people just don't know what's going on. Y'all know that, right? So we were standing out with our little clipboards outside the grocery stores and stuff. Have you registered to vote? Yeah, I've been registered for 20 years. I said, well, let's just check. Let's just check since we could do it. And we checked, and I can't tell you how many people were not registered. They didn't know that they weren't registered. And when they saw that, they not only registered, but they got ticked off enough so that they went home and they told other people. That kind of that's kind of what Robert Simmons, what you made me think about. When people hear things, if we were to say something like, you know, the only schools that are going to be getting more money, although public education is being defunded, are the charter schools. If we just started talking about it, would that be effective?
I think we should use the cell phones for educational purposes. I think the parents should receive cell phone texts on a regular basis about information, you know, just like a rolling billboard. Every week they should get information that they need to know. Secondly, if the kids have cell phones, and they do, we need to use them to teach them. It's like a lot of pastors will say, turn your cell phones off. I say, turn your cell phones on and write this down and text this to 3 or 4 of your friends. I think we have to engage them so that they are listening and learning at the same time. And they will teach you how to do reels. We need to do reels on a certain educational points. We have to use the technology that's available to us to communicate in a different way, in a more effective way than writing on a blackboard that nobody's looking at.
Come on, because ain't nobody looking at the blackboard no more. Nobody is looking at the blackboard.
I agree.
Oh my gosh. You know, this is good. You know what I wish is that through what we've talked about, that everybody listening gets an idea of how we can engage the community. Because I think we as a community can, you know, we can do things. We have power, we have agency. And I think of Kuji Chagalia, come on now, you know, we can do what we have been trained to do, that our ancestors had. And they didn't even have that big old word, but they knew how to do that. And I wish that we would, as a community, just start jotting things down. And I'm going to ask that if you have ideas like that, to send them to us at the Proctor organization, because we're going to be doing a summary of this meeting, and we're going to be presenting some resources for people to look at and to consider, because it really is on us who are engaged to help encourage other people to be engaged too. And so I'm going to ask if everybody would do that. But I find that, you know, when we start talking about things that are not going great, I just feel bad. But then when we start talking about solutions, I say, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I want to thank you for your conversations. It's almost time for us to end, but I wonder if both of you would give a closing statement, and then I'll give our closing. So Dr. Whitaker, I'll start with you.
So my closing statement is to stay informed, to stay involved. It is very hard to advocate for what we don't understand as it relates to the direct impact of policies that are being made and passed at the local, state, and the federal level. So stay involved, stay informed, and whatever you do, reach out to the schools and find out how you can use your skills and your talents to be of great benefit, because we need all hands on deck today more than
Sure
ever
do.
in the history of public education, in my humble estimation.
Thank you, Dr. Janette. And I forgot to mention, Dr. Janette, that you received our Beautiful Are Their Feet Award from the Proctor organization last year. Forgive me for my, we like to lift up the heroes and the people who are out there on the battlefield. So I just needed to say that to everybody. Go ahead, Dr. Janette.
That was like an amazing honor. I never thought I would get it, so I was very excited. I think we have to come together as a community, wherever you are, the preachers, the pastors, the popular personalities, the teachers, the principals, and parents have to come together in meetings to discuss what is happening in the educational system. We must work together legislatively at every level of government, city, county, state, and school boards. Attend the school board meetings of the schools where your child attends. If you can't go, then send your representative. Some parents are working. Find somebody you know and trust to go to those meetings and come back and report to you. We need to make the information at these meetings more available to parents.
Yes.
Stop having school meetings in the middle of the day. You know they're not able to come.
Come on now.
We need to demand that school board meetings on weekends when parents can attend. And if they can't go, pastors, you should be attending the school board meetings of the schools where your church sits. You have to open up these buildings and make them available for learning and as a resource for our children. They're our most precious commodity, and we owe them.
We sure do.
Life.
We sure do.
Whole life and an educated opportunity.
I want to thank you both. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be preparing some resources to distribute to the people who joined us on this call, and you can share them with other people as well. There's a website that I'm going to give that you should look at just because it's interesting. It really talks about schools in Texas, but I put my zip code in there and found some information. It's called don'tdefundmyschool.com. Don'tdefundmyschool.com. And when you go on there, you find out I put my zip code in and I found out how much our public schools in my area will lose because of what's going on with the Department of Education. Now, it is a site that was set up for Texas, but I don't know, maybe Jesus was with me or something because I put my zip code in it. But it's good when you put the information in, it's good to see the numbers. One thing you talk about and it's like in the air, it's something, but when you see the numbers, it does something to you. And so I encourage everybody to look at that website. It's very powerful. I want to thank y'all again. Goodness, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you so much. And thank those of you who are listening and watching. Thank you so much. You have been your presence has meant a lot. I can feel your spirit. I know, Robert Simmons, your spirit was coming all through. I love that. That's what we want. We want people with the energy and then with the wherewithal to help us make a difference. We the community. These are two outstanding educators. They know stuff that we don't know, and they can help us with all the stuff that we don't know. But it's about a community working together with all of our different areas of expertise to make something work. And I know that we can because we've done it in the past. That's our history as African Americans. So I just want to thank you. And I want to say to those of you who are, I'm going to call you a proctorite, that our conference coming up in 2026 is going to be in Chicago again. It's going to be in Chicago. So the dates are February 23rd through the 26th. And, we want you to save the date and look out for it and tell people about it. We also want to encourage those of you who attended the conference. I know when we were leaving the conference in February, a lot of people came up to me and said, boy, we just need to talk some more about this. If you want to talk more about it, because we're still planning conversations conversations, please email me at susan@sdpconference.info, and because we're forming conversations. And the other thing that we want is that if you are interested in doing a short video to talk about how being involved in Proctor and what Proctor does has impacted your life, again, send an email to me or to Marcus. Marcus's email is, Marcus, what is your email address? I'm getting ready to get it wrong. I think it's mtab. I'm going to say mine. You can say yours. Mine is Susan at
Marcus
SDP
T.
Conference.
Marcus
Okay.
T.
At
At
SD.
sdpconference.info.
Thank
Marcus
you.
T.
Thank you very much, because I was sure getting ready to get it wrong. Susan at sdpconference.info. And please let us know, because we're going to send you a script. Very little. I mean, a couple of seconds, maybe not a couple of seconds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to talk about how Samuel Dewitt Proctor Conference and its work has affected you and impacted you. So we would really appreciate that. And I don't know if Reverend Damien or Dr. Carruthers want to say anything before we call a night. Anybody? Dr. Damien, and Dr. Carruthers, do y'all want to say anything? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, I guess not. All right. Well, listen, thank you, both of you. It's so nice to meet you, Dr. Sonya Whitaker. And it's so nice to see you again, Reverend Dr. Janette, who I called Sandra at the beginning of the thing. I do call people by the wrong names. I'm sorry. But it's so good. And I feel blessed that we had you here to lead us in this very important conversation. Thank you to the Samuel DeWitt Proctor staff. Thank you to everybody. And, as we leave here, I just want to say this. And I say this to the young people that I work with, don't stay on your phones all the time. And don't get all your information off of, TikTok and whatever you're looking at. Don't do it. Don't do it. Find something that inspires you. And I tell the kids that I work with, I want you to learn something new every day. And when you come, I want you to tell me something new that you learn. And if you're really good, you're going to tell me something I don't know, which is a whole bunch of stuff. But I think that they respond to that, because that stuff that's circulating is toxic. It's toxic for kids. It's toxic for adults. And so I tell our kids to do that, and I hope that everybody will do that. Let's do the little things that we can do to save our kids, and then make a doorway to open so that there'll be a space in their daily lives to receive something new. I think we owe that to them. God gave them to us to be stewards over their lives, and I think we can do that. So again, thank you, everybody. I hope that you all have a really good night, and God bless you. Take good care. Okay.